Cool, let's get started. Welcome everyone to the Secrets of an Amazon Acquirer, How to Scale Your Amazon Brand, a fireside chat between Zentail and Unibrands. I am Paul Caprillo. I'm the Director of Growth here at Zentail. I'm excited to be hosting with our CEO, Daniel Sugarman, Unibrands, Mark Goldfinger, the Head of Business Development, and Brendan Feinberg, the Head of Investments, two members of the leadership team at Unibrands. I'll let them introduce themselves shortly. Today's format is a pretty casual fireside chat, all about building and running a great business. If you have aspirations of being acquired or just want to understand kind of what good looks like, how you can improve your operations, you're in the right spot. This will be recorded, is being recorded, and will be sent out afterwards. We've also solicited questions from the audience during sign up. So we'll start there, and we'll additionally reserve the last 10 minutes or so for additional questions. So feel free to pop those into the chat as you hear something and want to go a little bit deeper on it or something comes up. So before we dive in, we're going to do a brief overview about Zentail and Unibrands, and then we'll get into it. So just a quick introduction to Zentail for those of you that are not familiar with Zentail. Zentail is the premier multi-channel management platform. We are ranked #1 by a web retailer. Sellers or brands use Zentail to sell across multiple marketplaces and web stores like Shopify from one central catalog with one set of workflows. Zentail is the only platform that has smart types, which allow brands to automatically create beautiful listings from their existing data without having to map, configure, or learn new taxonomies for each channel. So really, we make managing all marketplaces as easy as managing Amazon. So if you're already multi-channel or you're thinking about expanding to new sales channels or starting a web store in 2022, please check us out. I'm going to hand it over to Mark to talk a little bit about Unibrands.
Awesome. Thanks, Paul. Daniel, thank you guys both for having us, and hello to everyone who subscribed and is joining us today. Excited to be here on a Wednesday afternoon. So I'm Mark Goldfinger. I head up the business development at Unibrands and focus on helping kind of find the right brands for us to speak with and hopefully partner with and acquire as we go through the process, but really focus on building the name Unibrands, our brand awareness, partnerships, sponsorships, and really helping get people excited when they hear the name Unibrands and knowing who we are. So Unibrands is a strategic buyer. We've been around since a little over a year right now, but we actually chose to operate the first kind of 5 to 6 months in stealth mode. We wanted to make sure that we really had a strong foundation, and we spoke to buyers, we spoke to brokers, we spoke to partners, we spoke to, most importantly, the sellers, and really learned what they wanted from a buyer when they were ready to sell their business. In February of 2021, which 10 months ago, but really probably feels like a couple of years ago, if you ask Brendan and I, we had our first press release. We announced the closing of our seed round of $25 million from family and friends, our first 2 acquisitions, and more importantly, 3 or 4 differentiators, which we were really proud of and we felt helped kind of make us stand out from some of the other buyers. So for those of you who haven't worked with us before, we focus on 8 specific verticals. They range from juvenile and baby to garden and outdoor, sports and fitness, lifestyle, arts, home and culinary, personal care, home care, pet care, and one of my favorite, supplements. Our technology, we spent a lot of time building out the technology of not only how we help integrate brands onto the platform, integration for us, and we will probably get into that, but is a massive part of our process. Brendan's team not only handles all the investment side, but also making sure that we have a seamless integration so that we can grow the brands correctly. And then, of course, from day one, we've operated on both sides of the Atlantic. So not only do we have team members who sit in Miami, New York, London, Berlin, Shanghai, Seattle, but we also focus on scaling these brands on and off of Amazon, as well as helping them scale internationally. My background comes from international expansion, so this is one of my favorite parts of what Unibrands does, and one of the reasons I was so attracted to joining this. And last but not least, and probably another most important one, is that we love to stand behind our LOIs. Our investment team will do a ton of due diligence pre-LOI, so that when we do get to that process, if we're lucky enough to get there, you can trust those numbers that we present you. We've grown from about 3 to 5 employees in January to a little over 60 employees right now. Very proud of the executive team, all the way down to everyone in the trenches with us. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Mark. That's great. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Dan, and we'll get started.
Thank you, Paul. Again, I'm Dan Sugarman, CEO here at Zentail, in case you missed the early intro. Really excited to get into it, the secrets of scaling your Amazon brand with a world expert here in Unibrands. And before I start pushing on the tough ones here, Mark, I got to ask, we had, when your name came through, when we first got connected, our head of sales, Mike Goldmeyer, was like, Mark Goldfinger, someone I went to camp with when I was a kid, had the same exact name. That's funny to see that name again. I've never seen that name. So do you remember a Mike Goldmeyer from camp?
I do. We called him Goldie. And apparently he still goes by Goldie now. I had our marketing manager working with Allison and you guys, and I was CC'd on an email, and then all of a sudden I get a side email from Michael Goldmeyer. He's like, "Dude, how are you?" And I was like, "Michael Goldmeyer, I was like, Goldie? Like, WTF, seriously?" He's like, "Yeah, man, we got to catch up." So he jumped on one of the calls when Paul, Allison, Carolyn, Brendan, and I were all chatting. It was great to see his face. It was, I said to the team, I was like, I don't think I've spoken to him in easily 15, if not 17 years. So it's a small world out there, to say the least.
I've definitely known him for over 10 years now. I don't think I've ever called him anything but Goldie. So he definitely still goes by that, even in the office.
I love it.
I'm thinking to myself two things. One is Mark Goldfinger and Mike Goldmeyer. Like, there's no way that these guys will ever forget those names. And then two here I have is, sorry about that. How did he get the Goldie name?
He went to camp first. It was my second sleepaway camp. It was his first, and he was younger. So everyone started calling him Goldie, and I either went by Goldfinger or Finger. Awesome.
I thought that story was too funny to not share today. Cool. So let's get into it. This webinar today is about scaling Amazon brands. So what does that look like for Unibrands? What I know that EBITDA is a common metric. Is that what you guys use? And what does that EBITDA growth typically look like for the brands that you acquire?
Cool. Hey, Daniel, it's good to be here. I'm Brendan. I head up the investments and integrations team at UNYBRANDS. So we make the investment decisions and execute our M&A transactions. And those M&A transactions are really a partnership in large part with our operating teams, who are responsible for growing and running the brands once we've acquired them, making sure that we have, kind of fully fledged operating strategies to grow the businesses that we take on. And we think about sort of like scaling brands. Sort of what we're doing is working with really successful brands and founders who have taken their businesses to a pretty meaningful scale of success in the Amazon ecosystem. So in many ways, we're a lot of those initial conversations that we're having are to try to learn the history. It's not sort of like, let's rush into the future and sort of like forget about the past of this company, but the brand voice, the colors, the packaging, the way that the brand has evolved from a product's perspective, all of those things are really important to us. So as we're getting to know the founders and before diligence and then through the process of buying their companies, it all starts with what is it that you've built here? How did we get to this point? And then how can we sort of add to the story? We're not in the business of creating stuff from scratch or retooling completely things that already exist, but there are things that we can do we've just got sort of like more resources and kind of more experience across some areas that are easy wins maybe for us. And it really depends on the business that we take on. Sometimes we buy companies that are in every market globally, and that's fine too. And someone has had the ability, the operator has had the ability to kind of grow internationally. But a lot of times that's an easy, nothing's easy, but a quick win for us is to take advantage of, European expansion. Those marketplaces are 20 or 30% of the size of the US. If your product already has a strong review and rating profile and is loved by customers, the headaches of the logistics network and the VAT applications and all of these things can be distracting for founders, and frankly, it's in some ways more distracting than it's worth. It takes your eye off the ball of the core business in the US if that's where you've started. The same goes for the other direction as well, and the opportunity is even bigger for us there. So Mark talked about it. We have sort of a pretty equal-sized team and equal-sized brand portfolio on both sides of the Atlantic, and we understand European customers and US and Canadian customers really well. Of course, there's other marketplaces that matter in the world, and we're always sort of testing and growing elsewhere, but those two anchor markets are sort of easy opportunities for us and places where we get synergies, having kind of operating teams, suppliers, logistics networks on both sides of the Atlantic in categories where you add another business in the same category. That's sort of the first, like I said, not the easiest thing. It does take some time, but a really big growth opportunity for us is to take what's worked in one market and bring it to another.
That's really interesting. So it sounds like that's your big differentiator here is making international expansion very seamless and something that's maybe not as accessible when you're growing your Amazon brand at a smaller size.
Yeah, I mean, even with us going through it in the initial stages, you sort of learn, how difficult it is. And actually, I've spoken to a lot of founders who had the same idea, right? Like, let's just launch Europe, take it to the UK, whatever. There's a big market there, and Amazon is a meaningful presence. And then later walked it back because either the administrative effort and cost of VAT filings and sending product over there, and again, many people sort of hunker down and say the opportunity, where I started, whether that's in Europe or in the US, is so meaningful. And I haven't tapped it out yet. So rather than distract myself with all of this paperwork, like, let me get back to product development and innovation and building, my brand voice and my listings and competing in the areas where, I've had a lot of success. And, we love that because we come in and we say that, great, we can, pour gas on that fire too, and sort of double down on a lot of those successes and continue to kind of push the global growth story.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think it's pretty parallel to our experience in helping Amazon brand scale. What you're doing internationally is really very similar to what we do, which is to help expand this Amazon business to bigger scope and to new potential users, right? To new customers through all these different marketplaces. And while the challenges that we help overcome might not be so much like the VAT, but there is a lot of overlap when it comes to logistical challenges and things like that. How do I know how much I should stock in this place? What 3PL should I use? I'm used to using FBA, those sorts of things. There's challenges there, and then really making sure that the listings are super high quality on these new marketplaces is probably one that's might work well within the Amazon ecosystem, but then when you look at this with other marketplaces in the US, everyone uses a completely different language. So what the Amazon taxonomy looks like might not be the Walmart taxonomy and those sorts of things. But then if we make that easy, then there's huge growth unlocked from that we've seen. The typical Walmart store that launches or relaunches with us will scale 3x compared to what it was doing previously. So we're very familiar with very similar sort of growth strategy. What you're doing globally, I think, is very sort of parallel to what we might be doing domestically.
Yeah, I mean, those new channels are so important too. For someone who has, focused on Amazon and had success there, starting to think about these other channels, the opportunity to be early is a massive opportunity. Think about competing on Amazon in 2013, 2014, 2015. That's kind of what you're doing in a Walmart ecosystem now, or in a category specific ecosystem, where it doesn't replace your Amazon channel, nor should it. But those are all going to be kind of growing channels. They really want to support companies being successful on their marketplaces, especially brands and products that have been successful on Amazon are really attractive to a Walmart, for example. And they'll be able to give incentives and support you, and you can kind of ride the wave of their category growth, less sort of like of a dog-eat-dog competitive nature that you might get in some categories on Amazon, and sort of the expertise that you gain that a lot of people have sort of optimized Amazon to the nth degree, and now there's kind of new green space in some of these other channels. So I mean, having a tool to manage all of that sounds super valuable.
Yeah, 100%. Really appreciate that. And I think the other benefits there too is it increasing on Amazon. Now you have to invest in the advertising to bridge that gap. So on some of these new channels, you don't need to as much because there's not as much selection. There's not as much heavy competition. Lots of people have all sorts of challenges of getting up, like we already listed. Making sure that listings are high quality and making sure that they have the right inventory in stock. That gives a real advantage to the people who are getting up properly, which is very difficult to do for most sellers. And then that creates a review moat to help dominate as they scale, and as the competition comes, you already have this foothold in the same sort of way that we saw on Amazon.
Yeah, I mean, I was just gonna comment. One of the way that we think about, you sort of to your first question, how do you approach kind of growing, optimizing, running a brand? We operate off of sort of what we call the ROB model, ROB, ready, optimized, boosted. And what's interesting is, like, you think about the features that you've talked about on Zentail, for example, you sort of are hitting all of them. Like, we think about ready as just the key features are in place, your listings are compliant with terms and sort of like done the right way, in the right format that you're going to land on the SEO pages and things of that nature. Optimized is all about kind of tweaking pricing and promotions and advertising strategies, and kind of like, once you've set up and ready, then optimized is all about kind of pressing on these other levers in the context of what you're already doing. And then boosted is how do you kind of grow outside of that initial box that the company has been operating in. So that's new products and new marketplaces and new geographies. And so, like, our team sort of, attacking all of these problems independently. But the more, and then you end up with a system of like a lot of tools and softwares. And so the more you can sort of like have all of that managed in one place and optimized through one ecosystems, that's what we try to build for when we're building product, across a big global portfolio. But for that to be accessible to small companies is ideal.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So it sounds like that ready portion, is that where you typically see brands coming in with, like, they have high quality listings, they've really invested in the SEO and the content that is there, and then you guys help out with the optimization and the boosting?
Yeah, if something is missing in ready, then it's sort of got to be fixed type of thing. It's not, I mean, it might improve the quality of the business. I mean, you could take the other side, which is not just the sort of like sales channel brand sales side, but the inventory side, or supply chain in general. Sometimes, people are finding creative ways to manage their inventory management, their shed, it carries their stuff, and like, we're going to sort of professionalize their supply chain. So those are just kind of the table stakes to being able to do what we do at scale. So when it's not impossible that things would be missing in what we would call the ready bucket, but they're just things we've got to sort of like fix and address for. Or, and other examples are like regulatory alignment and things like that, just making sure that we're sort of running, the size of our business needs to be compliant in every way that it can be. So we're focused on getting those things right, and then we're starting to layer in the growth strategies.
That makes a lot of sense. I think there's so much opportunity on Amazon. So if you have a product that can thrive there, and you can set up the content right and position it from a keyword standpoint on Amazon, from the SEO standpoint, you can grow pretty quickly. And I think that shows potential for future growth with all these other opportunities that might not be as easily accessible. And really what we built that platform around too is saying this content in Amazon is really good, right? Like it's really good, it's really deep. There's a lot of structured data there. This can all be mapped cleanly to these other platforms, but that problem is difficult, and everyone's doing it by hand. And really what we saw, kind of the leaders in the space, like Channel Advisor, everything had to be done by hand. Like, here, go map this, and it was very expensive. And we tried to take that price point way down to make it a lot more accessible. And we tried to make everyone setting up the same mappings for every different category. So if we can automate all that piece and ever work off of a central brain that says, okay, I understand exactly what this Amazon catalog is and exactly how to get this into the proper way on Walmart, for example. And these are the other attributes that are maybe missing that can optimize it on Amazon and Walmart. All of a sudden, that's, this business that was doing $1 million might be doing $2 or $3 million. And that's kind of what we built the business on. So something I think very similar to you guys there.
Reminds me that when we were just setting up earlier, the guy who set up that company was one of the first big Amazon sellers that I met, and we were talking about, like I said, brand, product. Tell me about sort of the history of your company. And he was making the point that they'd spent a lot of time and energy on how to sell on Amazon, how to present themselves on Amazon, not how to present themselves to their customers. It just happened to be through the Amazon channel, and also confidence that Amazon's rules were the right box to be playing in. So if there was some regulatory language you couldn't use or some certification you needed, they just figured if we did it on Amazon, let's not sort of go recreate the wheel when we build our own website and our direct to consumer channel and when we do our Walmart channel and eBay's. 100%. Let's just sort of use the content that we spent a lot of time optimizing for and put it into these other places. I'm sure they did it manually at the time, but it's obviously a better way.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of common problem that we see is that sometimes people can just create completely different content from different places, maybe not even totally consciously, or try to expand too quickly when they're not seeing the growth on Amazon. Like, Amazon's a really, really great place to grow if you really focus your energy there, and you could be successful there, and you can scale that up past $1 million. Like, you're going to do really well on these other channels too, with all that brand equity that you've built, all of that content that you've built. You figured it out, just like you said. You're playing in the right bounds to be successful, and now it's going to be easily translated to other markets and marketplaces. So I have a totally different question here, which is, what was the most surprising thing that you've seen after acquiring a business, being handed the keys and saying, okay, let's grow this thing together, right? Like, what did you see on the other side there that kind of shocked you?
Yeah, I mean, part of this just goes to the learnings of coming into an ecosystem new. So for somebody who's experienced on Amazon, they might sort of, shake their head at what I didn't know at the time, like early in our tenure of buying companies. I mean, there's the things that you would expect to look out for, right? So, and your inventory position is super important. One could even appreciate, without a lot of Amazon experience, that running out of inventory and not being listed or not being able to sell is a massive impact, and that the algorithm is going to punish you for this. And that's something that we spend a lot of time sort of focusing on and thinking about, is making sure that we have a strong enough inventory position when we come in, and that we're, pretty quickly solving for any challenges that, including during diligence if it's needed, solving for challenges that we foresee on that side, especially in the current environment, right? Oh, yeah. But one thing that I didn't know, certainly the first company we ever bought had this sales strategy, not uncommon on Amazon, but I didn't have a full appreciation for it, whereby they were using parent-child relationships for products that were similar to one another. There were different types of stuffed animals, but they were not sort of compliant variations in the context of different colors or different sizes of the same product. So we do high quality due diligence. We had an advisor tell us you're not allowed to do this, and we said okay, that doesn't seem like the biggest deal. We'll just sort of split them up, and they'll all be their own parent listings. And what could the impact possibly be? Literally our first acquisition, right? So we now know a lot more than we knew then. I certainly didn't have a full appreciation for the level of efficiency that you're getting by having a hero parent ASIN supporting lower sales volume, not variations, but childs underneath the same category. So your advertising efficiencies are different. The number of sort of like sessions and conversions are very different. Somebody comes to hit the hero that has a huge number of reviews, and the children ASINs are sort of carrying the review mode that they don't then have when they get split up. And so the sort of, full impact of this, I think we underestimated, learned a lot from it. And frankly, it was a small deal. We sort of intentionally did a small deal as our first sort of like step into the space. So it didn't punish us too badly, but it also helped us to build good muscle to, figure out how to make these other items sell at the level that they need to, without the support, without the crutch of a hero ASIN kind of carrying the day. So it's not an uncommon strategy. We've seen similar, many different tactics across Amazon that might be similar, but that was one of the early ones where we split it up. We, 6 weeks later, start to see a meaningful sales pace drop off, and then started to try to figure out what was happening and how we could solve for it. So that was learning for us for sure.
Yeah, that's super interesting. We've definitely seen the same thing. It seems like just a fantastic growth strategy on Amazon. It's, your listings share authority, right? And they share reviews. So when you launch a new variant on a listing, it's going to start at that elevated position of a listing that's sold, tens of thousands of units before and has all these reviews. It has the click-through rates and the conversion rates and the SEO that has that additional authority of that, the hero ASIN, right? So we've seen the strategy work really, really well for some of our customers too. It also presents really interesting challenges. I think that in the one that you're calling out, it sounds like there was a terms of service issue, but sometimes depending on category, there's style pivots and things like that, pattern, where all of a sudden you can have 1,000 different products, dresses or whatever that are all in this one listing together, and it could make sense, and it could be well within the terms of service, and that could create a massive growth bomb where they're all every sale from all those things are keep adding to the value of this, and every variant you release for this keeps adding to this authority, the reviews and the SEO for creating more sales. So we've seen this really successful. And then one of the pieces that comes to mind for me, and some of the pain we've had in our business that came out of this was, well, okay, this makes a lot of sense on Amazon, but how does this make sense on a place like Shopify, right? Where the SEO might work very differently, and it has to be very specific to a smaller set of the products in that group. And so what we realized is we're making this listing automation software, and the grouping is supposed to be different on this channel or that channel, or it really needs to be to optimize growth. So eventually, after a couple of years of sort of tinkering with this and trying to figure out exactly how to do this, we actually released a feature that's been really successful that we call listing splits. Okay, so you have a giant listing on Amazon that shares all this SEO and authority, and it makes a lot of sense there. You need these things to be split up on Shopify. You need these things to be split up on eBay. So what we can do there is say, okay, how do you want this to be split up into smaller groups? Okay, it's the style for this, right? That's a common one that you can kind of group into a massive listing. And then you'll have these smaller listings on Shopify that just say, that just vary by size or vary by size and color, things like that, where the grouping has to be right for the right sales channel, which without automation, how do you even go from that Amazon channel then to Shopify without just endless work? So that's one that I'm
an agency at $60,000 a year or something like that. That's kind of interesting, right? Because I would imagine that marketplaces are going to look similar. eBay, you mentioned, is maybe different, but Walmart is
right.
going to build basically what Amazon has, right? They're just going to try to build the same and take some of the share. So the design is going to be similar, sort of like fundamentally. But Shopify is a fundamentally different category. The way you attract customers and convert those customers and all these other things. So being able to leverage the same content again without spending a lot of money on dedicated agencies or other things, that's tricky. sure that's not the only example, I'm sure, of ways that you have to, adjust what you would do on a marketplace on Amazon for a direct to consumer channel.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we're, kind of grinding out every day over here, trying to figure out all these little intricacies and how do we bake that into software and just make it dead simple, to kind of just, our real vision here is to just add a channel like you're adding a friend on Facebook, right? Like just build out this network of e-commerce, where it's just so easy. And it's taking a lot of work to get there, but we're kind of getting there fast on those broad strokes of what it takes to create these high quality listings that sell on these different sales channels.
I'd be really curious to see what you guys see in the context of which brands or products are successful or not successful trying to go from Amazon or marketplaces to off Amazon, because it's, I've seen many really smart operators, founders who have built large presence on Amazon and then tried to launch Shopify, and the cost of acquiring customers, or maybe just the category they were in, or the price point that they had, or the margin profile, like they just sort of, spent a lot of time, energy, and money and broke even or lost money and then kind of walked it back, similar to what I was saying about kind of launching an international market. And, this is something that we can do, kind of grow businesses off Amazon, in addition, meaning like direct to consumer, owning your customer channel rather than through a marketplace where somebody is there to search for and buy a product in your category. But I'd imagine you sort of have data on people that are sort of like, working or not working as they try to kind of wade into these new waters that are just different from the marketplace channel.
Yeah, that's a really great question. It's a great call out too. I think that it kind of goes both ways. First off, it's like these really super successful Shopify sellers aren't necessarily successful on Amazon either. They're going from a really small set of structured data that's all custom, to this deep structured data that's on a marketplace. The SEO works different. We talked about the hero listing. There's all these little intricacies that might make you successful on Shopify that are very different than the intricacies that make you successful on Amazon. So we're finding that a lot of Shopify brands are finding it very difficult to make that switch to marketplace, especially, if you go to the Shopify app store and you just like click, oh yeah, let me add this Walmart connection, let me add this Amazon connection. You're not likely going to be super happy with that, or you're going to be wondering, like, I thought people bought a lot of products on Amazon. What's going on here, right? Like, but the actual growth strategy is very different. And on Shopify, on Amazon, Amazon's bringing in all these viewers, right? And if you get the SEO right, if you get that content right, if you find this right niche, if you get your advertising strategy right, on the Amazon advertising, right, like that's how you start to build that. And on a Shopify, it could be very different. It could be, can you get the right groups of people? Can you get the targeted blogs to promote your products? It can be Facebook and Google advertising. Facebook is increasingly being used for discovery, and Google is great for that spear phishing. Someone's typing in a product on Google and saying, like, this is what I want to buy. If you're that top result, that's how you can really start to build your brand there. But it takes a lot of investment to make that work.
Also jump in there, Daniel. I know I've been a little quiet here. I don't want to interrupt the stance going on. But two of the things are one is, one of the people watching even messaged and asked, how do we define successful off Amazon, right? I think, when you look at Shopify or you look at other DTC platforms, it really also comes down to what category you're in. I think in the personal care category specifically, people have a much easier time selling and growing and building a foundation for them on Shopify than they will when they come to Amazon. Amazon can be a helpful beast, but it can also be a scary beast to people who don't necessarily have all the tools or are scared about missing a change in terms of service. All of a sudden they lose their listing or they lose reviews. They're now on the fourth page. It becomes a lot harder for them to kind of continue to grow and scale. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, and I know we're jumping the gun a little bit on this Q&A, but this seems really relevant for right now. But when we're talking about the success off Amazon, across Zentail's user base and predominantly, our customers are Amazon first brands, Amazon traditionally the resellers, they're authorized resellers, and they're going from very dominant Amazon business to trying to be successful on these other channels. They also might come from Channel Advisor. That's actually where most of our customer base has sort of transferred from. And then they're really actually trying to hit this level of success. And so what we see across our user base today is that we take this from a 90% plus Amazon business to less than 75% Amazon. And that's huge. And when you factor in the level of effort that it might take to go multi-channel, and then what we can do to automate that and to make it a central command center for that, it takes this brand that didn't make sense outside of the Amazon ecosystem. What happens when there's competitive action or this or that? There's a lot of anxiety around that, into a long-term sustainable business. That's kind of like the end goal. It's the growth, but it's also the control of your business. It's not, it makes sense outside of just, sort of being a purchaser on Amazon and filling that gap. So that's really huge for some of our customers, or for our customer base at large. And then for some of our customers, it's even more extreme than that. We've seen some customers where their Amazon can become less than 25% of their total business. And it's just awesome to see how diverse some people's sales channels can get, given some of the opportunities out there. Again, like being successful on Amazon is often finding the right niche with the right volume, right? And these niches can be quite larger on some of these other places where the selection is just not there. So jumping back to totally different question, on your guys' end, what are some of the items that you like to check off when you're onboarding a new brand? What does that onboarding process look like? What changes happen there?
Yeah, so I'll jump in, I'll kick it off, and then I think, I'll turn it over to Brendan. We have what we put together kind of, it started as this 70 step checklist, and now it's grown to 80, 90, right over 100 kind of step checklist that starts with my team trying to figure out, what information can we get that we can pass over to the investment team, and how can we really help these sellers walk through every piece of information the investments and integration team will need to then be able to go through as smooth of an acquisition as possible. We're looking at everything from, what kind of inventory they have, of course, what the revenue is, how they're going about their marketing, what they're doing in PPC strategy. And we start to bring in, what's really nice is we bring in, all of our experts across the organization to come work with these sellers early on, so that we can help prepare them and walk them through that entire process. This allows us then kind of, when we do hit that final button and we, turn over the keys, it allows us to say, okay, we're not actually starting at day 0. This is actually technically kind of day 45 for us, if you look at a, 4.5 or a 6-week integration process. So that way we are helping these sellers, and Brendan can talk more about the steps specifically. Yeah.
I just have one question there too. When we're talking about looking at the revenue, and just because I have this always on my mind, how do you guys look at the revenues? Is it like kind of strictly the Amazon revenue? Obviously, you guys do the international piece with Amazon. How do you look at the business? Is it sort of really just what's there? I've heard kind of different answers from different folks that are aggregating the Amazon businesses. What is the important revenue for you?
In terms of what revenue they're considering in their valuation?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like we have a concentration in Amazon across our portfolio, but across the portfolio and brand by brand, we obviously sell through other channels. Includes the Walmarts of the world, a lot of direct to consumer, often through Shopify, but sometimes other channels. Sometimes in specific categories, you will sell into sort of like wholesale or e-wholesale, like Chewy in the pet care space, for example. And frankly, we intend to build kind of a full scope skill set across commerce, right? We want brands that are finding people where they are and that are loved by customers. And so if we were sort of so focused or to the exclusion of other sort of sales opportunities, I think we would be missing the point. I do think that there's, you know, a lot for us to learn and get great at on Amazon. So we do a lot of these other things in smaller quantities now and as tests and to sort of learn and grow. But over time, the scale and scope of our global portfolio will sell through lots of different channels. And so we think about value of the business that we're looking at, inclusive of everything that they've done. The only thing that's worth flagging on that front, which like anybody buying any business will say, is the reason why somebody pays you a multiple for the performance of your most recent year is because they think they can grow it and they think it's going to continue to, you know, have at least the baseline that you've delivered, right? So if there's, you know, revenue that or profitability that I wouldn't include in the acquisition value, it's because it's discontinued in some way. It's a one-time thing, or I don't know, I made the example yesterday, you sell zinc tablets during COVID, or you sell face masks during COVID, and now you sell 0 face masks. But in the last 6 months, you sold some because people were buying them and you were opportunistic and you made some money off of it. I can't pay you a multiple of that money for my ongoing profitability of that category because it doesn't exist anymore. So that's the type of adjustment that we would make. But I would never say to you, well, you have a Shopify channel that makes all this money, I'm not going to buy it from you. I'm an e-tailer, so you know we run companies and sell them everywhere, so and sell products everywhere. So you know, if you have that type of business, or if you're working with somebody, especially at scale, they should be, you know, more capable than just Amazon. It's a little bit too specific and focused in my mind.
It's great that you guys have that forward thinking there, because, you know, like alluded to, some of the brand aggregators that I've spoken to, they say, well, we're only really set up to manage the Amazon today. So, you know, I understand that you're doing this other business here or there, but we're not going to be doing it in the future. So that's discounted revenue. But it sounds like you guys are much more like, well, there's people out there. You got to get your products, and you got to get these listings in front of the customers where they're shopping. And these entrepreneurs have been super smart and successful in doing that. We got to continue doing that on the other side.
I'll go a step farther, because we don't think about it all that often as consumers in the United States, but Amazon doesn't own the marketplace channel in many other countries. They own it in a lot of places, a lot of the Western markets and Japan, but South Korea's channel is different. India's channel, they compete there, but Flipkart is different. South America has sort of a fundamentally different channel, like very similar, right? It's a marketplace of brands and products, but sort of owning a different user set. And so there are obviously sellers and brands in these categories. There are, the platforms themselves, and all of these people globally are looking at what's happening in the United States or in US and Europe and saying, maybe we should roll up these brands and create value there. But they're going to have similar but distinct challenges, those different sort of like, you know, brand aggregations and brand operations on these other channels. But those channels aren't off of our radar at all. I mean, like long term, selling into all of the global markets with product that meets the needs of those consumers feels like, you know, if we're building something of the scale and scope that we want to, that's the type of thing that's definitely on our radar.
Awesome. There's one question I wanted to ask, definitely before we get into the Q&A, to try and make sure we're providing value to everyone listening today. You know, what's kind of the one thing that everyone can kind of go home and do today to grow their business, right? Is there some sort of like, what's the lowest effort, highest ROI action that Amazon brands can take that you'd recommend to help scale today?
Mark, do you have a good answer for this one? Because I was thinking about it.
I don't think there's no one answer, right? I think it depends on what stage every business owner is in. If they're thinking about starting to sell, then the biggest piece of advice is don't take your foot off the gas, even once you've started talking to a potential buyer, no matter what, until you've completely handed the keys over. Keep your foot on the gas and keep helping grow and strengthen the business. I think the other thing, you know, and as Brendan was saying, like, you know, when we started acquiring brands, we didn't know what we didn't know, but we tried and we learned and we answered questions and we made mistakes. And the biggest thing was that, like, when we made a mistake, we owned up to it. We talked about it. We kind of did like a quick, like, best lessons learned from that, and then continued to grow and made sure to document and not make those mistakes again. A lot of the founders that I speak with are all first-time founders. They're going to make mistakes. Don't be hard on yourself. If you run into a stock out or if you miss something that you should have caught, make sure you're aware of it so that it doesn't happen again. and continue growing your business. Like, have fun with this. This is such a fun ecosystem to be part of. I'm amazed by it every single day. And a lot of the founders I think we work with are also just incredible people that have great stories and great reasons for why they built these brands. If you're too hard on yourself or you get yourself down because you missed something, you're going to let it completely derail your entire progression.
That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah, it is.
There's like the tough part about the question is like, it's never easy, right? We all sort of know that building companies, competing in these spaces, taking on the risks of inventory, like these things are hard. You're a small business operator and a competitive entrepreneur. Like, you got to sort of lean into that and know that it's gonna be tricky. If it was easy and it was a soundbite and I gave it to you, then there wouldn't even be alpha in it. Like, everybody would just know, So you gotta find your thing and lean into your brands.
Yeah, and especially like today in Amazon's ecosystem, because it's grown. You said it earlier, it's grown tremendously over the years. I remember when we really started interacting with the Amazon ecosystem as sellers all the way back in 2012, really 2013. We launched as Amazon sellers ourselves before we built the SaaS product, and everything we built here was actually running that business to start. But I remember going around to all the VCs in Silicon Valley and saying, hey, this third party ecosystem is going to totally overtake the first party sales. And everyone at the time just thought, well, no, it's just like a Trojan horse strategy to get everyone's data and it's all going to go to first party. But it made a lot of sense on Amazon's end to allow everyone to bring in that content, and they're making great margins on obviously the logistics side, the sale, the commission that they take, the 15% there, and then now on top of that the advertising, and it's much better model for them than taking inventory, holding it for 6 months. This is a much faster way for them to scale, and it's been awesome to see their thinking change over time, the ecosystem grow and just scale out of control. So yeah, now there's less necessarily totally green pasture of just like, here's the opportunity, just fill in this one thing. But the total amount of buyers has increased so much. The total just volume of eyeballs and purchasing on Amazon as they've increased the Prime and everything else has also made it so that like that little sliver niche is now multi-million-dollar opportunity if someone can find it, right?
I also now realize we missed the alley-oop. The easiest thing you can do is sign up for Zentail and expand your business everywhere.
There you go.
How did we not know that was the right answer?
Appreciate that, guys. Cool. Let's get into the Q&A portion. I think we have some questions already. I'm going to pull up the formal Q&A area. Oh, Paul's got his camera back on.
I'm here to help too. So one question that I saw that I'd like to get answered is, how does Unibrands think about B2B businesses? We've talked a lot about D2C. Is B2B interesting? And kind of, are you looking at that revenue differently?
Yeah, so I guess B2B can mean two things to me. Either you're selling a product that's B2B, meaning like the business is using it. That kind of stuff, we're mostly focused on consumer products, right? So we're probably going to have the vast majority of our products are going to be, the end user is going to be a consumer. It's possible that we might have things that are, or a sort of like a feature set within one of our brand's products that would be used by companies. I don't know, I could come up with examples, maybe office equipment or something that companies might buy. And so we can sell into sort of like large channels, but we're not going to have sales teams going out and sort of like managing these kind of negotiations for like what I would call classic B2B sales. There's a separate type of B2B, which is wholesale retail, which is to say I sell to Amazon 1P, or I sell to Chewy in bulk, or I sell to Target, retail, physical retail, and they buy a lot of stuff from me at a discount, and I sort of think about the business differently. Those things are definitely on the table for us. We're happy to kind of learn in those spaces. It's a lot easier for us in the context of like pets with Chewy, which is just an e-commerce channel, very similar. There's a lot of sort of nuanced differences to the relationship management and sales management when you're selling into a traditional like physical retailer. That's a little bit different from selling online. So like I said, over time, there's no question that, you know, some of our brands belong in Williams-Sonoma or something like this, right? Like those will be channels that we're always sort of like expanding into, probably selectively. We're never going to flip to like all of our stuff is sold through Walmart physical instead of Amazon e-commerce. But when we have a broad portfolio of consumer brands, some of those things will find a good home in different sales channels. Like I mentioned earlier, sometimes that's direct to consumer, sometimes it's physical retail, sometimes it's online in different channels. So all these things we're comfortable with and focused on, with the priority being e-commerce for the near term.
That's great. And then another kind of question along the terms of like value. What is, when you look at sales from organic versus paid, you know, how are you valuing those things? Does it like not matter because you're looking at EBITDA? How do you think about kind of organic versus inorganic sales?
Yeah, I think I see the question here, and it's sort of like a very tactical advertising question, like what's the right cost? It's sort of like the opposite kind of. The answer sort of depends on your business, right? It sort of depends on what your margin profile is and how much traffic or conversion you can afford to acquire versus have come organically. A very sort of like heuristic figure would probably be like 35% of your revenue can be paid and the rest probably has to be organic before you start to lose money or have really thin margins. Obviously that can change company to company. And the main reasons why it changes is either you have like a very high margin product, you can afford to acquire more of your customers or spend more of your revenues on customer acquisition, or you have a higher lifetime value than you might expect in a kind of standard one-off purchase environment. So I get somebody on subscribe and save, and I'm more willing. Now, this would probably become organic revenue that balances it back out, but from a customer acquisition or like CAC to LTV ratio, you're willing to overspend on your first acquired customer with the expectation that some number of those people are going to be long-term customers and worth more than just that initial sale.
So it sounds like really, rather than looking at organic versus paid, paid is great as long as your customer acquisition to lifetime value makes sense. So and adjusted by your margin, right? Because if you're a smaller margin, then you can't be looking at the total revenue, right? So it's how much money am I actually going to bring in on this? Is it worth spending the money for advertising? If you get that customer acquisition and then they come back and they repeat purchase all the time, you could spend quite a bit. So that's a real ratio to look at. And as long as you're covering that, then it's a positive growth opportunity. And that's sort of the cap that you should be willing to do. And that's kind of regardless of getting acquired or not, because you know, this is what's going to put more money in the coffers, right? Or sort of bleed out the cash if you're not careful there. So that's awesome. I see Adam Flanders chiming in. Yeah, he's a longtime friend here at Zentail. I remember flying out and doing installation for him back in 2015. Awesome to see their company scale and eventually get acquired. You know, that was way before we were sort of managing billions of dollars of e-commerce over here, when we were, you know, a couple of guys in the basement trying to make this software thing happen. So great to see Adam back when life was simple.
Adam,
yeah.
Hey, Adam. One more question that I have, and we'll see if any more come in. Back to advertising. Some of the acquirers that I've spoken with, advertising is like their key driver of growth post-acquisition. How often do you see like easy wins in advertising, something that's really unoptimized? Maybe people aren't using the right tools. How does advertising fit into that post-acquisition strategy?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to decouple advertising from the whole conversion funnel. So I would think about sort of like, okay, advertising, well, how many units do I sell is how many people sort of land on my page, and then how many of them convert, and then what are they paying, right? So all three of those things are, you know, optimization opportunities, and often they're in counter opposition. So you're doing this optimization problem where, you know, if prices increase, your conversion comes down, but is that good or bad for revenues? So when you have, a lot of data and a lot of different brands and a lot of experience, you should be able to find ways to optimize these things. And then on the session side, like getting people to land on my page, it's not really just which keywords am I buying. Maybe almost certainly you can carve off stuff that's performing less well and invest in things that are performing better, or just continue to invest higher in certain pieces of the keyword stack where there's opportunity to sort of like acquire more traffic. But it's also like, what are your images? What are your sort of like organic language that you're using? How does all of this affect the algorithm? So, you sort of what sounds like a simple answer to the question becomes like, well, there's like a lot of moving pieces here. And for anybody to be getting it right, it's almost always wrong in any given moment in some way. And so you're always just kind of like tweaking and watching and learning. And so that's why you need technology tools and a lot of data and operating teams who know what they're doing, or agency partners if you're a sole operator who like are really good at this. But unfortunately with agencies who are like really focused on you and your business and like getting it right rather than just getting it good enough. And so I think the answer to the question is, we have a lot of sort of like expertise and resources and tools to be able to optimize for these things, but even we aren't always getting it right. So it's a challenge, and we've seen a lot of success in our sales optimization across that full story, but we've got a lot more to learn and a lot more to do. And everything that I just said on Amazon is a really different story from Shopify, right? So like when you're trying to kind of think about doing both, you've got to have a broad set of expertise and experience.
Got
Really
it.
good call.
Go ahead, Dan.
I just had someone to riff on there. One of the things I would recommend is learning a little bit about kind of the high level metrics that you should care about on advertising. I know we touched on that earlier, but I've seen, there's lots of agencies out there. They could be a great, powerful resource for an entrepreneur, but they could also, if you don't understand specifically what the results should look like, you could you could be spending money that's getting no results. And we talked about it earlier, but I've seen it as bad as, spending thousands of dollars a month for thousands of dollars a month in top line revenue, and presented a certain way, it might look like a fine investment. But when you get into the nuts and bolts of it and you look at kind of what results you should be expecting, it's not an acceptable level of performance. Then you're also spending 20% of that advertising budget then to the agency. So really just understanding on a high level what this should look like in the best case, even if you're not doing it, tweaking each knob, is really important to know that you're getting a good investment from your partner.
And your buddy Adam has a good point here, which is that like, depending how you structure that contract, you can incentivize your partners differently, right? So a lot of people will incentivize themselves on how much money they spend on your behalf. Sort of like, no, like let's incentivize you on how much money you make for me, and then we're all on the same team. So that's exactly what Adam's saying.
Very smart.
Awesome. We are we've got 1 minute left, so unfortunately I have to cut this off. I know we could talk for much longer. Time flew by. So I'm going to share my screen with some of our information on it. I'd like to thank Mark and Brendan and Daniel, and I'll also be posting a poll, which you should be seeing now. If you want us to specifically reach out and have a conversation, you can respond there. And let me share my screen. Okay, so everyone should have our information here and can address the poll. And again, we're going to send a recording out. Any questions that were unanswered, we'll try and answer those too afterwards. And I'll leave this up for a couple more minutes. And otherwise, thank you everyone for joining. I had a lot of fun and looking forward to the next one.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having us.
Awesome.